Kane overskated into neutral ice. Kempe with a step into the zone. Kempe to the net. Scores! Kings win in overtime. Adrian Kempe sends them back to LA with a chance to win the series.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Whast Hockey, and the season is over. The Kings unfortunately lose in Game 7 to the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers are going to go on to the next round, and they're going to face Calgary, which should be a pretty exciting series to watch as a fan. Not having to be scared every time McDavid has the puck, but all in all, I think it's pretty clear that if you look at the season as a whole, was it a success? Yes. The whole mindset for me coming into this year is I really believe that the team could be a wild card spot team. I thought they could maybe squeak in the playoffs. I didn't expect them to do much in there, and honestly, that's what happened. But looking at how the series went, how the Kings played, the fact that they were up 3-2 going into Game 6 and then had a chance to win it in Game 7 and they couldn't pull it out, it's disappointing. I feel like we didn't see the best Kings team during that 7-game series. I think there was stretches in this year, and yes, injuries play a part of it, but even when the blue line was really banged up, there were stretches of this year where this team played very, very good hockey. And unfortunately, when you look at the scores, you look at how the games went, that team didn't show up in this playoffs. Is there a reason? Yeah, there's probably a couple reasons. I think one, again, is injuries. We're missing Drew Doughty. Victor Arvidsson didn't play. You also have to think about kind of the undisclosed injuries. I feel like it's pretty clear in my eyes as someone who's watched Anze Kopitar his whole career. He was not playing at 100%. A guy like Matt Roy was not playing at 100%. Alex Edler was not playing at 100%. I would say even a guy like Alex Iafallo, Adrian Kempe, I feel like they weren't playing at 100% either. And, it's something I talked about in the last video where these guys haven't played an 82-game season in almost 3 years. Those little injuries that you pick up throughout the year, I think they kind of came to fruition during the playoffs. And, it's unfortunate that they didn't win. I think there was some really big moments. I think Game 1, winning that game was really, a really good moment for the team. Philip Deneau scoring the game winner late in the game. I thought that was a big moment. You go to Game 2, just terrible from the Kings. They get shut out and you allow 6 goals. And then Game 3, they allow 8 goals. I mean, a big thing that I've talked about all year is that I feel like the mentality of this team has really improved over the last few seasons. And time again this year, the Kings have given up some bad goals and they've gone down 2-3 goals and they found ways to come back and found ways to either, get the game to overtime or even win it. And in those 2 games, it just didn't happen. And obviously, when you look at the series as a whole, those 2 games are important. Yeah, I mean, they lost 4 times, and 2 of them were complete blowouts. And, I think Todd McClellan, he had a really good quote.
For me, the whole messaging that didn't come from me or from our team per se was all about experience. And for us, that was a slap in our face because we were there to win.
Where, he just said what I feel like should be talked about more is that this team should be disappointed. They should be disappointed how they played the series because once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. As Kings fans, we should know that. I mean, we've seen this team squeak in as an 8 seed and go on to win the Cup in one of the most dominant playoff performances that there has been in a long time. So, it was unfortunate for those 2 games to go that way. But to the Kings' credit, they came out in Game 4. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of people kind of thinking maybe this is Brownie's last game at the Staples, and they pull out a shutout themselves, 4-0 win. And then in my opinion, Game 5 was the best game just in terms of that mentality. They were up early. Connor McDavid does Connor McDavid things. He ties the game. All the momentum is in the Edmonton Oilers dressing room during that intermission. Kings come out, that first shift from the second line, absolutely killer. Really takes a toll on Connor McDavid, Duncan Keith, who were out there at the start of the overtime. Adrian Kempe comes on. We've seen it so many times. Uses his speed, gets by a couple men, and puts the puck in the net. They win Game 5, take a 3-2 series lead, going back into LA. At that moment, I was very, not confident, but I was excited. I think in the back of my mind, you're just expecting Connor McDavid to do something crazy, and unfortunately for us, he did. And we'll get into what he was able to do and just how dominant of a player he is. I mean, I don't know if people need to hear it anymore, but I think just watching him for 7 games is, I don't watch a lot of other games besides Kings games, so it was kind of a treat to watch, even if it was at our expense. But going back to Game 6, that's pretty much the key loss. I feel like, just in terms of, I think if the Kings were going to win the series, they had to win that Game 6. They kind of had a chance. It was a 1-goal game up until the empty netter from Evander Kane, who also had a really good series as well. And then in Game 7, the Kings just didn't have it. I mean, that Game 7 was kind of a mix of probably the worst game the Kings played in terms of effort and not being able to really do anything. But you also have to give the Oilers a lot of credit, because I thought that was by far their best game, especially defensively. They just shut everything the Kings were doing down. All the shots were either getting blocked or, they were doing a really good job forcing the team to the outside, not having Mike Smith having to make any really big saves. So, it's good that this team had this experience, and again, going back to that Game 5 win, like, that's something that I think, when you talk about kind of playoff experience and veteran leadership, that Game 5 overtime is the perfect example where, the Kings have that. They have guys like Dustin Brown. I should say they had guys like Dustin Brown, but, Quickie, Kopi, you saw how they were able to really just calm that team down. And even though they were under fire for the last 10 minutes of the game, up until regulation ended, they were able to come out, do exactly what they needed to do, and end it early. And so you just hope that, all the young guys use this experience from this, really close 7-game series. I mean, the scores, if you add them up, aren't close, but again, this team had 2 chances to win the series. That's, that's pretty good. And so I just hope that this team really uses this to kind of go on into the future. And a guy like Adrian Kempe, you got to come back to that moment of scoring an OT winner. He's, that's something that you kind of bury into your brain so that the next time you're in this kind of situation, you have something to visualize. You have that feeling, and it's about doing that again instead of, oh no, how are we going to score in overtime? So overall, it was a good series. It was fun to watch. I mean, now that it's over, I can kind of calm down a little bit. It was a fun series to watch, especially, first time being back in the playoffs since 2018, and 2018 was a terrible series for the Kings. It was fun. It was fun to, argue with Oilers fans online and see how cocky they were after Game 3, and then seeing the doubts start to build and seeing everyone kind of pile on the Oilers fans. So overall, I enjoyed the series. I enjoyed the season, but we got to talk about a couple things more in depth. All right, so what went wrong for the Kings? Despite what I said earlier, the number one thing is Connor McDavid. I mean, you look at the point totals, right? The only game he doesn't get a point is the Game 4 where the Kings had the shutout. Every other game, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2. Unfortunately, that's kind of what happens when you play against Connor McDavid. You kind of have to just know in your brain that he's going to probably make some crazy play where he goes 200 feet, dangles through your whole defense, and scores a goal. And he's probably going to make an unreal pass to Leon Draisaitl, who's going to get an easy open net goal. The problem with the Kings is that they can't score. They can't score the way that the Oilers can. If you know that you're going to be down 2 goals, this team is just, it's been a problem all year. It's been a problem for the past, how long? I mean, even in those cup years, this team is not a goal scoring team. And I think, looking into the future and the offseason and everything, in my opinion, that's the biggest thing they have to think about and try and add is goal scoring. Obviously, the power play. And, I thought the penalty kill was actually pretty good, especially for how lethal Edmonton is. But the power play, you just can't rely on it. It's unfortunate because the Kings had their chances, to score on the power play. They got some pretty timely penalty calls. But unfortunately, I mean, we know this from watching this team. You just know that they're not going to score. You know that it's going to be 2 minutes where they really don't build any momentum. They're probably going to give up a shorthanded chance, and that's what happened this series. So, that's kind of the downfall of this team. But again, Connor McDavid, what he did, I'll be honest, I was, kind of in the hopeful mindset of, maybe Connor McDavid's not going to show up that much. The Oilers aren't that good in the playoffs. They've struggled the past couple of years. Maybe they're going to be a Toronto 2.0 where they just, keep failing. But no, this man, he wanted to win this series, and it wasn't single-handed. And obviously they have a guy like Draisaitl, but Draisaitl got banged up kind of towards the end of the series, and realistically, a lot of Draisaitl's goals come off the stick of McDavid anyway. So, it wasn't a one-man show, but it was very, very close. So, can't do much about that. But what about us? What about the guys on the Kings? How did they play? Well, in the preview video, I had 4 points that the Kings need to kind of hit to win the series. Number 1 was Adrian Kempe. Kempe, he did lead the team in points. He only had 2 goals, both of them coming in that Game 5. Obviously, one of them was the OT winner. That was a great goal. But, he didn't score goals. And the assists were nice, but I said that he needed to score goals, maybe even a goal per game pace. And unfortunately, 2 and 7 just wasn't enough to cut it. However, the guy under him, who had 5 points in the series, I mean, our best player this year, and I would say the best player in the playoffs as well, especially if you look at the plus minus, it was Phillip Danault. I said Phillip Danault needs to be a shutdown centerman like he was last year in the playoffs from Montreal. Shutdown, I don't know if you can really shut down, especially a 1-2 punch of McDavid and Draisaitl, but you look at the plus minus, which I think this is kind of where plus minus shines, is in short game stretches. So if you're looking just at a 7-game stretch, especially when you're looking at the same team every time, you look at the first line, right? Kempe's a -6, Kopi was a -5, Kopi's a -6, Phil Danault's +6 for Phil Danault, and he was playing pretty much every shift against one of the top 2 lines for Edmonton. That's really good. I mean, I feel like Phillip Danault did exactly what the Kings needed from him. Unfortunately, it's a team game, and there's only a few players that can really win series themselves, and we just looked at one of them. So that's 2 of them. Number 3 was Jonathan Quick. Jonathan Quick needed to play like playoff quickie, and I don't know. I don't know if it was his best series, right? I mean, there was some games where he let in a lot of goals. He got pulled. Cal Peterson went in that 8-2 loss. But you have to admit that Quickie kept us in games, and especially Game 6, especially Game 7. I mean, he did everything he needed to give this team a chance to win. Eventually, it was just the goal scoring that, let us down once again. So, I feel like Quickie is either a push or he got that one right. And then the last one was Brendan Lemieux. I singled out Brendan Lemieux, but it's kind of more of a team mentality, right? I said this team needs to be physical. They need to get on Edmonton, especially their defense, especially Mike Smith. And there were times in the series where I thought they were doing that, but I was unimpressed with how they were able to, to knock the Edmonton Oilers off their game. I feel like Edmonton won the physicality battle. I think, this team isn't a very big team. They're not super physical. I mean, we have a guy like Carl Grundstrom who, to his credit, Carl Grundstrom, 3 goals. I mean, tied for the team lead that series. He had a hell of a series. I've always stuck up for Carl Grundstrom. He gets benched a lot after I feel like he doesn't really make mistakes, and I feel like he plays a pretty good game and a game that the Kings lack. So it's nice to see him get in the lineup in the playoffs, and he really took that and ran with it. And I think it's because of his size. He's one of those guys who can bang the body around. He's not going to get pushed over. But unfortunately, I just feel like as a team, as a whole, I think, the guys like Zach Kassian, guys like Evander Kane, I just feel like they got the better of us on the physicality battle. And unfortunately, that hurt us. So with all that being said, I mean, what's next for this team? I'm going to make a video kind of going over the season as a whole and then making videos about, kind of the off-season outlook. I already mentioned that goal scoring is a factor, but just in terms of this group as it was in this series and as a whole during the season, I feel like there was strides, specifically by certain players. Arthur Kaliev definitely needs to get a mention. I don't think he even recorded a point in the playoffs, but I felt like his game was really good. And, I've been praising him all year long. I feel like the speed of his development is just astronomical. It's just at this point, he just kind of needs to get his body up to the point where he can be, a top 6 winger and play those minutes and play an 82-game season. But guys like him, Carl Grundstrom, like I mentioned, I think, this series as a whole was good for them. They played pretty big minutes. They played in tough situations. I mean, I think the Kings did a pretty good job of trying to roll 4 lines. They did kind of get stuck in the line matching, trying to defend against McDavid and Draisaitl a little bit. But I actually think that they played their best when they were able to roll 4 lines. And, maybe that's kind of a chicken and the egg situation. But, I think the strides that they were able to make throughout the year and continue to make them in the playoffs, that's big. And then even, the medium level guys, guy like Adrian Kempe being able to score a game winner. Like I said, that's something that he can keep in his back pocket. And he knows now, he can do McDavid level plays. I wish I had the clip, but, I was pretty emotional when he scored that game winner. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm a huge Adrian Kempe fan. Ever since day one, I felt like he really had the skills to be, a 35 goal scorer kind of player for us. And Jim Fox said it really well when, he was talking about everyone's going to talk about McDavid and Draisaitl and how much skill they have, but Kempe has skills too, and that's where I think big picture this team needs to get to. They need those players who can break the game. They need players who have the X factor and have the confidence. And so I hope that a guy like Adrian Kempe, I hope that a guy like Trevor Moore, guys who had pretty good series, I hope that they can take this confidence and start next season off on an even better foot. I want them to believe in themselves. All year long, I've praised the team for the team mentality and how, you can plug guys in and when one guy gets hurt, another guy steps up and does his role. And that's great. That's what gets you into the playoffs. But when you get to the playoffs, you do need some guys to be able to really just, break out of their shell and, win games for you, win shifts even. Just, being able to take a little, 20, 30-second stint on the ice and just change the momentum. And whether that's in the system right now, whether it's in free agency or, what have you, that I feel like for me is what separated the Kings and the Oilers this year, where the Oilers have a guy like Connor McDavid, and Connor McDavid, when he sees his team's down 2-3 goals, he steps up and he scores goals. He gets points. He brings his team back. And I feel like the Kings are just lacking that right now. Kopi is not the guy who he used to be. Before the Kings were able to rely on Kopitar, I don't think we're at that stage anymore. I think we're at the stage where we need guys like Arthur Kaliev, Rasmus Kupari, obviously Quentin Byfield, Gabe Vilardi, if he sticks around. These young guys need to progress to being able to win those shifts, create momentum by themselves, not just as a team and playing that 1-3-1 and being structured and defensive. There needs to be some kind of offensive flash and flair in this team. And that's where I feel like the Kings were missing the most this season. And specifically in this series against Edmonton, when you have the number one flashy and flair-filled player, Connor McDavid, going up against you. So I'm going to leave it there. It's going to be a segue into the next video where I talk about kind of the nitty-gritty and what this team can really do in the offseason to make that next step, because this last season was a giant step, right? We went from a team that was pretty much a basement team, top 5 picks in the last couple years, 8th overall pick last season. We made the playoffs. We pushed a really good team to Game 7 in the first round. Next year, you need to keep all that momentum and keep going. This team cannot be complacent. They can't think, hey, look, we made the playoffs, because there's other teams, especially in that Pacific Division, who are going to be better next year. Vancouver, they're going to be a better team next year. They were much better under Bruce Boudreau. He's coming back. You got to watch out for them. Vegas, that's another team where, let's be honest, I mean, they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit. They're going to be a better team next year. I mean, as much as I hate them, you have to appreciate what their front office does, where they just try and make their team as good as possible, and every single year they try and get better. That's what the Kings need to do in this offseason. That's what Rob Blake has to do. I feel like he's done a really good job of it, especially kind of last offseason when you had guys like Drew Doughty, you had guys like Kopi saying, hey, we need to make the playoffs. Like, we don't have that much time left. Enough with the draft picks, enough with stockpiling these prospects. We got to do something. And he went out and did it. And I really appreciate that from him. It gives me a lot of confidence in him. But they have to do the same thing next season. They can't just rely on a guy like Byfield developing more, or Kaliev developing more. There's big moves that have to be made, because it doesn't get easier. It always gets harder in this league to make the playoffs, to stay where you're at, and especially when you're trying to push from, kind of a brink team in the playoffs that we were this year to being a contender, being an Edmonton Oilers team. It's tough, and it doesn't happen just by waiting and twiddling your thumbs. So that's gonna be it from me, guys. If you watch the video and want to give it a like, I would really appreciate that. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I don't upload too much, so it's not. I'm not gonna clog up your feed. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, the link is down there. I'll just post when I upload, and sometimes I'll repost some King stats that I feel like are interesting. But anyways, guys, it was a really good season. Much better year. Better ending to the year than last year. I mean, especially, I guess I'll end it with just giving Dustin Brown one last congratulations, because, obviously it sucks for him to end his season and his career, but I'm so glad that he was able to go out fighting in the playoffs, fighting in a Game 7 with a chance to win. Then, on one of those victory laps where after every game, all the teams, come out and give him a little hug and stuff. I thought that was really cool, and he definitely deserves it. And it's going to be sad without Dustin Brown, but I feel like, knowing Dustin Brown, there's no way he stays away for too long. I'm not saying he's going to be a coach or, in the front office next year, but he'll be around. He's always going to be a part of this team. And thank you, Brownie.